Hey, what's up? It's StormDexter with the 4th episode of City Skylines, and sorry if you guys are getting sick of these videos, but this is one of the games that I enjoy recording, editing, and also uploading. But all I'm gonna be doing in this video is building this port, which is gonna be used for importing and exporting cargo through ships and trains, and also storing commercial goods with warehouses. But that's about it, so I hope you guys enjoy. Alright, so the first thing that I did was I picked a spot that's in front of the highway exit, because since the port's going to generate a lot of traffic, I wanted to make sure that it's connected directly to the highway. And then I terraformed this little island in here, but keep in mind that you don't need to find an island to change to have a port, since you can always bring the ground up from the sea anywhere on the map. And the shape that I'm going to be making from this island is just going to be a rectangle with the corners at a 90-degree angle. I also tried to straighten out the edges, but it was kind of hard to do because it just kept leaving these little bumps. But it's okay because I end up straightening everything out using the Quay landscaping tool. And instead of building a bridge by making the roads kind of go over the water, I just use the terrain tool to bring up the land. And what's frustrating is that whenever I do level the sunken ground to the land above, it brings the water up with it. So I always have to end up waiting for the water to clear up. And when I finally started building the quay to kind of act like a border, I found that there was a struggle when putting it down because I had to put it down in such a specific way. But there was a mod that I found, unfortunately, after I was done recording this video, which is called Quay Anarchy mod, and it lets me place these down with no restrictions, so I wouldn't have to struggle like I am in this video. So I'm just gonna save you guys the time and kind of just skip ahead because the struggle was definitely not necessary. Alright, so before finishing up the borders over here, I wanted to make sure that the paths that connect the two islands together are a little bit more wider than the two roads and trains together. And to do that, I have to build them first so I could tell how wide the terrain should be. And then after that, I build the quay to make sure that it has a more cleaner look. Alright, so then I went back a little bit to delete part of the edges because I wanted to add another thing, which is going to be the dock, I think is what it's called. Also because it adds a little bit of shape to the port. Instead of the island just looking like one big rectangle, it's also a good spot for the cargo ship building. But I ended up just moving it to the outer part of the dock instead of the sides. But even after that, when my city kept growing, I replaced it with the ship and train cargo hub terminal. And the downside to these buildings is that they come with their own road, so you can never upgrade or replace them to a road that you want, like a one-way street. Then I added this 12-meter in height 2-lane highway road with a avenue road below it, and this is because there's going to be two different types of trucks coming in and out of the port. The outer part of the avenue road is just going to be for trucks that are trying to get to the cargo terminal and leave. The inner part and the highway ramp are going to be used for trucks that are trying to get to the cargo hub terminal and also the warehouses. And here you could see me building the on and off ramps that feed and take people from the highway ramp and the outer part of the avenue road onto the dock. Also notice how I am separating the avenue roads by saying inner and outer, because later on I'm going to use lane connectors to make sure that no one can make a left turn at any of the intersections. This is so that the trucks don't really cross paths with each other and cause a bunch of traffic. And then I connected the highway from the path between the two islands onto the exit of the main highway. And you're going to want to do this for most of the towns or districts that you make, because having a close proximity to connections of highways really reduces traffic by a lot. And right now I'm kind of just continuing to build the avenue roads to wrap around the entire island like a loop or a NASCAR race course. And I want to make sure to curve the roads into each other when it comes to the corners, so that it reduces the amount of speed that they lose when turning. And I'm not really good with building interchanges, but I managed to make sure that the highway ramp connects to the inner part of the avenue road. And for the highway that's coming from the island, I wanted to make an interchange similar to a normal three-way interchange. So I'm treating the avenue road as if it was another highway where there's two lane roads that can never cross paths from each other. And it might seem a little bit too elaborate, but this is the type of stuff that you gotta do to make sure that you don't have any traffic in City Skyline, especially with cargo, storage, and industrial buildings, because those are usually what causes a lot of traffic. And the interchange might not look that great, but I can always go back to change it how I want it to be. Alright, so what I see a lot when other people are building their port is that they use a lot of cargo container assets, and you'll see this a lot in real life when looking at other cargo facilities. But the thing about City Skyline is that these cargo container assets are nothing more than just props, so you'll never see your city using these cargo containers as storage units, which is why I ended up using these warehouse buildings that are from the Industries DLC, since they allow your city to actually store things in them. And in this case, I decided to store generic commercial goods, mainly because I don't really have a specialized industrial area, but I do have the option to change what resource I want to store in these buildings if and when I do have those different types of industrial areas. But now you can see that I'm building these small alleyways for the warehouses to not be connected to the Avenue Road, but are connected to the alleyways. This is so that the cars in front of the warehouses don't really cause any traffic when they stop by to drop something off. Also, I kind of built the alleyway on the right a little bit too close to the highway exit, so I ended up deleting part of it later. Also, there was a bunch of small gaps that I didn't want to leave empty, so luckily enough there was some warehouses that were small enough to fit in them. Then after, when I was done putting these warehouses down to fill in the gaps between the streets, I turned some of the buildings on to see how well it would handle traffic coming from the city. But none of the necessary utilities were connected to the port, so I had to make sure that it was getting power and also getting water first. And one thing I suggest when building the water pipes and power lines of your city is that they should always go along the lines of your highway. And the highways are like the arteries of the city, so they should be connected to all of your little towns or districts in the city, or at least most of them, which is why it's convenient to have these power lines and water pipes built this way, because they are also going to be close to any remote town or district. And then I turned off the other cargo facility to make sure that the trucks that are importing and exporting go to the cargo facility at the port. And then I started setting these warehouses to store commercial goods, and I set them like this for only some of the warehouses, because if I did it for all, then there would just be an overwhelming amount of traffic at the start. And then over here you could see me using lane connectors to make sure that none of the cars that are using the streets can make a left turn and kind of get in the way of other cars. Also, I had to use more of the traffic manager mod to make sure that vehicles don't stop in the middle of the intersection. So you can see here that the warehouses on first delivery sends in a lot of trucks, but once the warehouses reach a balanced amount of resources, there's going to be less trucks going to them. Alright, so then I spotted a little problem over here. You can see that the cars coming from the 2-lane road on the right are turning left to get onto the slip lane to make it to the 2-lane highway ramp, and cars coming from the 2-lane highway ramp use the right slip lane to get onto the left side of the road. And if they do this at the same time, they're going to get in each other's way, which could cause potential traffic. So I just ended up bulldozing the roads to make new exit and entrance ramps in a way such that the trucks don't cross paths with one another. So I just make sure that people that are exiting the cargo facility use the right lane to leave. You can see over here, this is for trucks leaving to get onto the highway ramp. And this ramp is for the trucks on the bridge to get onto the road for the cargo facility. And finally, I made a little slip lane for people leaving the cargo building to go onto the outer part of the Avenue Road. But it wasn't really symmetric because the ramp on the left side was a little bit longer, so I ended up just kind of shortening it and making it look like the ramp on the right later on. But right now I was just using the move it tool to make sure that the exits and entrances curve smoothly. And for the intersections, I used the lane connectors to make sure that none of the cars were making any weird U-turns. So now you can see that none of the trucks are getting in the way of each other when they're crossing the intersection. I also started upgrading the alleyway road so that the trucks that are using the warehouses are all gonna enter on one side, and then when they exit, they are all funneled installed on the other side. And then I went back to the cargo facility so I could finally rebuild this ramp that was bothering me for being a little bit too long. And also it's symmetric, so it makes it look a little bit better, but not as good as I was hoping it to be. And then I finally finished up the lane connectors on each intersection on the avenue roads. I also didn't like how there was sand and grass all over the place, so I decided to paint the surface with cement. However, I decided to upgrade the avenue road with medium industrial road, which unfortunately kind of deleted all of the lane connectors I put at each intersection, so I actually had to go back and redo all of that. And you could see me finally getting rid of that alleyway road, which was causing these intersections to be a little bit too close. And after upgrading all of the roads to medium industrial roads, I started working on the lane connectors again, which was pretty tedious since I had to do it the second time, especially when I was using the lane connectors under that little bridge. I had to get the camera at a low angle if I wanted to work on it, but now you can see the trucks trickling into the warehouses, which caused a little bit of traffic, but after a while it cleared up. I also added the service buildings on the inner part of the loop instead of the outer, because if it were on the outer, they wouldn't get to emergency areas in a short time. I also added another source of cargo import and export building, which was by train instead of by ship this time. But again, I do end up deleting the train and ship cargo facilities because there was another building that kind of had both, and I used that instead. So when I was connecting the railroad tracks from outside of the port to the railroad tracks on the port, I was having some trouble with building a three-way interchange with the railroad tracks because there was these roads in the way, and I skipped at least 20 minutes of footage to get to this point. But it was a little weird when building the third row because you could see a little gap when I place it, but after all that it was still functional and the trains could choose any of the two directions when going to the intersection. And then finally I drew the train tracks to go between the highway roads, as you can see here, and a little bit under these roads. But despite making these railroad tracks, the two cargo facilities were too close to each other. And when they're like that, the trucks only use one building when importing and exporting cargo. But eventually when I do replace the two buildings with the cargo hub, they end up using both the trains and the ships, so it actually turns out to be okay. And now I'm kind of just drawing a fence around the port for decoration. And there are a bunch of empty spots around the edges, so I decided to fill it in with office building zones, which actually makes it convenient when connecting power to the port, because instead of trying to make the power cable lines go in the inner part of the loop to connect to the buildings, it can just connect to the office buildings outside. However, the power between the warehouses and the cargo facilities weren't connected, so I still had to connect them with power cables. And now the last thing that I'm doing is setting the rest of the warehouses to store commercial goods, and later on I do turn them on. And this is how the traffic looks like when the whole thing is finished. I didn't really focus on the aesthetics of the port, so it might not look that good, but yeah, I think that's about it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap this video up here. I hope you guys enjoyed that one, and I will leave you guys with this little cinematic here. So yeah, see ya.